You are listening to the One Day at a Time podcast. On this podcast, my guests share their stories of alcoholism, addiction, and how they recovered so that you can too. My hope is that you find the inspiration and resources you need to let go of what's holding you back so that you can transform into the person you were always meant to be. Ready? Here we go. Hey friend, I'm so glad you're here for this episode. Today, my dear friend Charlie LeVoir, the host of the Way Out podcast, is interviewing me to talk about my new book, The 12-Step Guide for Skeptics, Clearing Up Common Misconceptions of a Path to Sobriety. And stay tuned to the end because we talk about the dark side of social media sobriety. When I announced that the book was published, I had several people suggest that I talk about why I wrote the book, and I'm not great at doing solo episodes, so I asked Charlie to join me. By the way, follow me on Instagram at Arlena Allen because I'll be sharing about the Inner Compass program that's launching in January. The whole idea about this program is to help you get unstuck on your personal growth journey and solve the one problem everyone has in collapsing the gap between knowing what to do and actually doing it. We all struggle with internal resistance, and the new program will be focused on helping you resolve that resistance so you can feel freer to take the actions you already know to do that will help you break out of negative behavior patterns and make consistent progress towards your goals. I am so excited about this work because it's the work that frees you up to do all your other work. So that's it for announcements. Without further delay, please enjoy this episode and let me know what you think.
Arlena, welcome to the One Day at a Time podcast. I'm so excited to be on your podcast and introduce you to your own podcast to talk about your brand spanking new book, which I cannot wait to do. It is literally what the Quit Lit space has been dying to have, the 12-step guide for skeptics. This is going to be a tremendous discussion. Are you ready, Arlena?
I'm so ready. And if you could just bring a little more excitement to the conversation.
I'm going to need you to take 25% off.
Okay, that's good. I'm so glad that we're doing this. We were just chatting before, and I was like, look, I'll sit here, I'll talk your ear off if you let me. So we should probably just
Can we hit record? Let's do that.
Yeah. And I wanted you to be the one to lead this discussion because number one, you have such depth of knowledge of 12-step. And you and I are also very much in alignment when it comes to being open-minded about maybe some problems around 12-step and the fact that there are many paths to recovery. I think we share that. Is that fair?
Absolutely. No question about it. The 12 steps is very near and dear to my heart. And I am also fully aware that it is indeed an imperfect fellowship.
Yeah. Yes, sir. That is one of the tenets of the book, by the way.
I love that. We're going to talk about that. Talk a little bit about the difference between the program and the fellowship and how that can confuse some folks when they find themselves in a 12-step meeting and hear something or experience something that's rooted really in the fellowship, not the 12-step program itself.
Yeah, not the program. Yeah, that's one of the three tenets. The first one is that those 12 steps are a worthy endeavor.
Yeah.
There is a reason why it's been around for decades, almost 100 years, right?
Absolutely.
There's nothing else that's been around that long. And well, in the recovery space, and the truth of the matter is that they're based on ancient principles, right?
No question.
So these are
question.
that have been around for a long time and in a format that is consumable and can be applied to just about there's addiction, dysfunctions. It's been adapted to many, many issues. So it's a worthy endeavor.
So I think many folks might be wondering to themselves, Arlena, why in the world did you take so much time out of your life to write this book?
Yeah, literal years.
Yes.
I'll tell you what. A funny thing is, I didn't really want to write this book. This isn't the book that I wanted to write. I had illusions of grandeur. I was going to write some moving memoir. But yeah, not Ernest Hemingway by any stretch of the imagination. But what was happening for me, Charlie, is that so I've been doing the podcast for 8 years. Um, I actually have to call it out. It's the One Day at a Time Recovery podcast. Somebody new has, is, you know,
What?
yeah, yeah. I'm a little annoyed, but anyway, it's fine. It's fine. It's fine. So, but I've been doing the podcast since 2016. There's almost 350 interviews, not quite as many as yours. But that's a lot. And I'm sure you've had this experience where you interview people and they talk about, I don't know if you ever ask people why they don't do 12 steps, but that's sort of, I have a pre-screen process when I invite a guest that I find out whether they're 12-step oriented or not, because some people are sensitive about how they share how they got sober because of the ideas that have been proliferated in 12-step that are kind of this is one of the myths that you can't talk about your recovery, right? It's not a
Right.
we're anonymous, but it's not a secret.
Right.
People get confused.
They
So
do.
that's one of the things. Um, but so I always ask, are you 12-step oriented? Because I want to be sensitive to how I want them to feel free to share whatever it is that they want to share and just be sensitive about that. Some people are not. Like I have a very thin veil, right? I talk about 12-step programs, I talk about being in recovery, blah, blah, blah. I
Absolutely.
don't typically come right out and say that I'm aligned with any membership, any specific fellowships.
You and I are aligned that way. I recover out loud, but I do not shout or even say or state my particular recovery program of choice out loud. Now, if you come to me one on one, I will tell you that, but I am not going to do that on a public level. So my program is anonymous, my recovery is not.
Exactly. Yeah, and I still feel kind of conflicted about it because, if we talk about anonymity for a second, that if in the literature, they talk about there were so few people able to help. The few who were able to help were being overrun with requests. And the people, this was like their side hustle. This wasn't their like full-time job. They couldn't do it. So they remained anonymous. And it's funny, people got sober through letters back in the day.
Absolutely.
Yeah. When you
Absolutely.
feel like
You wanted to write the preeminent recovery memoir,
Mm.
but instead you came to the understanding that you needed to write this book. How
Yes,
did you come to that understanding?
thank you for keeping me on track. Uh, So all these people that I was doing the pre-interview chat with, I would ask them, why aren't you doing it? And they would give me, this is gonna be counter. I hate saying it this way. They would give me these reasons. And I'm like, that's not a valid reason. In my mind, I would never like invalidate somebody's feelings.
Right,
In my mind, I'm like, that's not a thing.
right.
And there are the three big trigger words that keep people out, right? The three big trigger words are like God, alcoholic, powerless. And I was like, that's not a thing. Like, that's not a reason not to do this process because there's a way around it. And what they're being confronted with are these misperceptions, these myths, these misunderstandings. And so the tension I was feeling was building and building and building over time. And I'm like, I just can't take it anymore. The misunderstandings and misconceptions are so pervasive that I was like, I gotta set the record straight. Like, nobody else is doing it. Let me just start the conversation. I'm sure other people will fill in the gaps. It's not a perfect book either. And I'm sure, but I think it's a good place to get the conversation started.
I think it's so needed because, as we talked about off the top, the differences between the fellowship and the program. So you might have your first experience with the 12-step program and meet somebody who is exceedingly religious.
Yeah.
And that works for them. And the 12 steps aligns very well with people who are religious.
Specifically Christian. Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah.
And you might get the impression that that's what the 12 steps is.
Fair.
And I can understand why you might get that impression based on that single experience. What you've learned and what I've learned is that the 12 steps aligns with all manner of wisdom, spiritual, and philosophical traditions. All manner.
Well said. Yeah.
And that's what makes the 12-step program so unique, is that whether you are a devout Christian, a devout Muslim, if you are an atheist, the 12-step program can be a valuable resource in your recovery.
You're so good. See, this is why I picked you to have this conversation, because you get it. And it's so funny because listen, at the end of all this conversation, you're just like, yeah, but I just can't do like AA. That's fine. There's Celebrate Recovery. There's what's
Smart.
Smart Recovery. Thank you. Smart Recovery is very aligned with like atheism, right? Celebrate Recovery is the exact opposite, which is very religious.
Yes.
So you could literally adapt it. And that is the whole, if you take nothing away from this conversation, Charlie and I will both agree that it's take what you like and leave the rest.
Got it.
On the experiment. I got that one from you, by the way. I have it latched onto that like a dog with a bone.
You and me both, sister. You and me both.
Run the experiment.
The
So it
experiment.
really aligns with I kind of lean towards the sciencey side because I grew up super religious, and in my mind and in my body, I sort of rejected religion because I had some misunderstandings when I was little. I thought God was going to fix me and turn me into something else. Something else. I don't know what I thought I was going to be, but this ain't it.
Right.
I thought I was going to be something else. So I had been begging God to fix me my whole life and was so defeated over and over and over and over again that I finally said, fuck it. If I can't be good, I'm going to be good at being bad.
Yes. Yeah.
Have some fun. I'm going to earn my seat in hell.
Got it. Let's go. Let's go.
Yeah. Do you know what I mean? Feel me out.
Absolutely. Absolutely. So that makes sense to me because there's such a divide, I think, between how the fellowship perpetuates a perception of the 12 steps versus what the 12-step program actually is. And so why I said what I said, and I'll say again, this book is needed in order to be able to clarify what is and is not the 12-step program. Arlene, who is this for? This book that you wrote, in a perfect world, whose lap does this land in?
So this is for somebody who's really struggling to quit drinking or break an addiction, really, because of 12 steps. But I spoke, and I say it in the very beginning of the book, I'm just going to use language through like drinking, because drugs and drinking, because that was really my experience. This can be applied to anything, but it's somebody who's really struggling with an addiction, right? Or use disorder, because that's a little less offensive. And it can be, let me just say that addiction is a spectrum, right? If you think that you are not addicted, I challenge you to put your phone away for a week, a day, an hour. It's like everybody is struggling with obsessive behaviors on some level, right? I mean, in this day and age, I think social media really poured gasoline
on the fire in terms of people are stressed out and looking for ways to distract from the pain.
Yeah,
And social media has provided, like, social media is also, an addiction.
absolutely.
So everybody struggles with something.
Is it also, Arlena, for people that have had an encounter with the 12 steps and found it either wanting or not right for them based on maybe a single experience?
I'm so glad you asked me that because I'll tell you who it's not for. It's not for people who are so angry and hurt that they are completely closed-minded. Like, nobody wants to admit that they're closed-minded, but there are people. I ran this little experiment, which went exactly how I thought it would go. Um, I posted some stuff on social media and got some pushback. And I thought, let me engage.
I'm wearing my surprised face. It looks a lot like my regular face.
Let me engage and see if I can talk this through with somebody who
Yeah,
is clearly hurt,
yeah,
understandably.
yeah,
Because when people go to 12 step and they are hurt, this is somebody who's really vulnerable and in a lot of pain. And sometimes people go to meetings and they get hurt
yeah,
by the people
yeah.
who are not necessarily operating from the fundamentals of the actual official organization. So they get hurt and they're angry. And you know what? Rightly so. I am with you. However, if you are so angry that all logic has left you, then I can't do anything for you. I am not I so I ran the experiment and I said, let me see if I can engage these people and see. And I was just it was, I learned, you know what? Let's not get into fights with strangers on the internet. That's kind of like first principles, right? Like,
Yeah.
don't get into fights with strangers on the internet. Like, they can't hear my tone. They can't hear that I'm actually very empathetic and compassionate about their pain, right? People make decisions emotionally and justify logically. So so the people that are just vehemently, is that they're really pissed off.
Vehemently, yes.
Yeah, thank you. If that's where you're at, then maybe this isn't for you
Yeah,
because I need a chink in the armor. I need just a little room to get in there to offer some compassion, maybe an apology. Like, I'm so sorry you were treated that way, validate some pain. However, so this is for people who are really struggling, who is considering going, but they've seen the steps and they've seen God, powerless, alcoholic, and they're like, yeah, no,
that's not for me.
no thanks.
Yeah,
I'm not religious. I'm not powerless. I don't believe in shame labels. I'm not doing that. So it's for them, but those that are open-minded, because I'm like, hey, you might like to know that's not a thing. And
right.
if you get past that, there is something amazing on the other side of this. If you've been to a meeting and you've gotten your feelings hurt, but what you're doing isn't working, and or maybe what you're doing is working, but you need community and support, maybe you're craving something deeper, this is for you. Just like, hey, give it another shot. And here are some guardrails for you, some guidelines to follow so that you can get the benefits of the program.
I'm feeling like if you're a person that's in an ambivalent space, this book might be for you. If you're a person who, for one reason or another, disregarded it really out of hand, perhaps because of the God language, perhaps because of the labeling of addiction and
I'm
alcoholic,
not that bad.
right?
I'm not that
You know,
bad. That's a big one. That's actually,
yes.
I had to call that one out in the book.
So I'm interested in that because, and we'll talk about that. I have a few questions first, but I want to talk about that because that's what kept me out for years. I hadn't lost enough yet. I wasn't bad enough yet. I'm not like you. I'm not like you.
Yeah.
Like, you all need this.
Yeah, it's good for you.
Yes. Then 100%.
Oh,
This program is wonderful. I'm glad you have it.
yeah. We were just talking about so condescending. It's like you and I were talking about, I don't know, we were talking about gambling addiction, and you and I are both like, wow, I'm glad I don't have that shit. I'm so glad those people.
Those poor
Poor
bastards.
people. Those poor bastards have Gamblers Anonymous.
Yeah, right. Which is exactly what other people think about us. Those poor bastards. Right?
How about the pot calling the kettle black, right? If you spot it, you got it. Yeah.
All right. So let's talk about some of the barriers that keep people out of the 12 steps and 12-step meetings and the fellowship.
Okay. So the tenets of the book are, like you said, the program and the people are two different things. And I'm not saying that if you do them, you'll stay sober forever. I'm not saying that you'll have to go to meetings forever. I'm not saying any of those things. I'm just saying that the 12 steps are a worthy endeavor. And one of the first thing I want to address are the three big trigger words, which is God, alcoholic, and powerless. And so when it comes to God, I'll just tell you a little story. I was so desperate. Listen, I got sober 30 years ago, and when I got sober, there was really literally nothing else
There
available,
was nothing else.
nothing else that I knew of. Like there was nothing else. I didn't have. There's a maybe put a pin in this one, Charlie. We're see if you can remember this for me later. I won't be able to remember this, but like social media, there's a lot of sober accounts,
Yeah.
especially like on Instagram, which are great, but there's a little dark side to that.
Ooh. Okay.
And the dark side is that people can get sober without 12 steps, that they are missing the magic,
Yeah.
like the guaranteed I'm talking a guaranteed transformation, like guaranteed transformation for free, for fuck's sake.
Having had a spiritual experience as the result
Yeah.
of these steps.
Yeah. So God bless. Like, I'm grateful that people are getting help and there's lots of paths to the same destination. But I think if I had gotten sober today with all these other options, I totally would have missed it
Yeah.
because of the first thing, the God word. But I was so desperate to be sober and there was nothing else
There was literally nothing else.
literally nothing else. And I was like, oh my God, if this is what it is, I can't do it. I had rejected the God of my childhood. And I met a gal pretty early on. I talk about her in the book, Kimmers. She was like, oh, yeah, that's not a thing. Don't worry about it. She said, let's do that. So she hands me a piece of paper and she says, write down all the positive. Let's just play along. Let's just play a game. If there is a God, just write down what you would want it to be if you could make one up. I was all cool. And so I wrote loving, powerful, I'm the favorite. Just you know what I mean? Like all the things that I want God to be. All power, all knowing, like the master planner, organizer, aligning stuff ahead of me, just all this stuff. And then she's like, okay, write down a column of all the negative things. Well, I don't want God to punish me. I don't, I don't want to suffer. I don't want to burn in hell. Just like all the negative things, right? And so when I was done, she's like, are you done? Oh, yeah. Handed her a piece of paper. She tore it in half. And she handed me the list, the good side. She goes, okay, we'll start with this. And I was like, that's it. She's like, that's it.
I
And I was
love
like,
them.
"God damn, I didn't know you could do that." I was not raised that way. I was raised with this is law.
Yes.
This is the gospel.
Yes.
And there's no negotiation. There's no trying to understand it. And I need it.
And there was a bunch of rules and regulations and requirements and
conflicting requirements
consequences if you didn't believe and do exactly what was required
in a very specific way.
in a very specific way.
God forbid you land on the wrong side of the planet when your soul comes to earth.
100%.
So I was like, make it make sense. I need it. I pride myself as a practical, logical. I had a dad who was super religious, but he was like a military guy. He was like a Marine, like an officer in the Marines. He wasn't like a drill sergeant guy, but he always played devil's advocate with me, which was a double-edged sword because it
Yeah.
developed this need to debate and develop like a critical mind. It also made me feel like he was never on my side and I was always wrong.
Right.
I was always wrong. And so, anyways, but I really latched on to this idea of being logical. So that's kind of why I lean to the sciencey things because when I lose my faith, when I don't know, there are times when I don't believe that God is going to help me, like it's God could or would if he were sought, I'm never so sure. I'm never 100% sure that he would, I know he could, or it could. I don't believe in gender God, but I do you know what I'm saying? So sometimes I lose
Absolutely.
faith, but I have science and I have my experiences, right? The whole idea of run the experiment is that I test out these theories and I have an experience, a lot of which I cannot explain, which opened me back up to the idea of spirituality. Like there is a loving force that is working in the universe for my benefit.
Absolutely. And there's a metaphysics that happens when we take spiritual actions.
Yeah.
There is a spiritual result.
Yeah.
So
Things
when we run that experiment and others have had that similar experience with God, their sponsor has them list all the things that they think are good and right in the world. And they use that just as a working model of a higher power. Just for now, just try it, see what happens. What's the worst that can happen? Or if you're like me and you just start praying to a higher power you don't understand and you have zero concept of it. For me, if I could make it up, it wasn't big enough for me. And so I just started praying to nothing, but I meant it.
Oh, yeah.
And that started to have a profound impact on me. What I realized was praying to a God that I didn't understand, that I had no concept of, but I meant it with every fiber of my being, didn't change the world, didn't change my boss, didn't change my kids. That higher power changed me.
Yeah.
And because I changed, everything changed.
Funny how that works. I don't,
Indeed.
I don't know if you've had this experience, but after being sober for a while and practicing this way, I would have a situation would arise and I'd just be like, you know what, God, just fix me. Just change me. Like sometimes I don't even know what it is that needs to change. I surrender. And there is such power in that point of surrender, which kind of leads us to the other word. I don't know if you still want to talk about that.
Yes. How do you get around the powerless word if that's a word that's really uncomfortable for you?
Yeah, so the funny thing right off the bat is that it's actually a phrase. It's powerless over alcohol. And people miss that all the time. It's a phrase. It's not a singular word. It's a phrase. And what I would argue, and I'd be so interested to hear how you approach this, but what I would argue is that if you ingest alcohol, you kick off a chemical chain of reactions that cannot be reversed once it's begun.
Mm.
It has to sort of cycle through. And it's a very predictable cause and effect. That's why we do it. We know exactly what's going to happen in the beginning. Like I can add some alter egos that would come out with that's a whole nother thing. But my argument is sort of based in science. It's based in fact. Once you ingest alcohol, you cannot reverse the chemical chain of reactions that has begun. It has to cycle all the way through.
Absolutely. And for me, and I'm always very careful to describe this as my own experience, and different people's experiences might be different, but a lot of folks do have a similar experience as I have when I ingest alcohol, which is once I take the first drink, alcohol is the only thing I want to put in my body.
That's funny.
That's
That
it.
was not the only thing I want to put in my body, but okay. I'll try to keep it R-rated.
I'm blushing.
Oh, sorry. No, but
It's
more. But more.
more.
Start drinking, and I want
You
more.
got it. And then it triggers an obsession. And
Ugh.
so for me, what I view as powerless is very specifically related to alcohol, and for me, it drugs too. W- Would I take the first one? I can't predict how many I'm going to have or when I'm going to stop. And then it triggers an obsession. An obsession is something that dominates all other thought. It's the only thing I can think about. And the only thing that relieves that obsession is taking the first one.
Yeah.
That's powerless.
Yeah.
To your point, Arlita, it does not say we're powerless over everything. In fact, quite the opposite. The 12-step program is an empowering program at its very core. Because what we do is we tap into a new power.
Right.
And when we tap into this new power, it gives us the power we need in order to recover.
Exactly. Reach. So good. So good. Now it's so interesting because I was on a Facebook message board. I get like these little, and every once in a while I glance at what this gal was saying. She's like, I don't believe in God. I think I'm an atheist, and it turns out she was agnostic.
Right.
But I'm like, well, first of all, if you have a problem with the word God, you probably have a problem with somebody else's God, so you get to make up your own. But the power can also come from just like me and you together, right? Like together we are stronger because it's like there's that old saying that you can't read the label from inside the jar, right?
Right.
And when I'm in emotional pain, I'm in the jar, and you are not in pain, and um, emotion is not clouding your perspective, so you can see things clearly. That's like when I bet a buddy comes to you and says, "Oh, she did this and she did that," and you can clearly see what the solution is, but they can't because
Right.
they're in it, right? So you and I together are way more powerful for me than me by myself. That's all.
Which reminds me of the God acronym group of drunks.
Yeah.
It, it can start that way.
Mhm.
My higher power speaks through other people all the time.
All the
All
time.
the time.
All the time. That's how I hear it the best, to be honest.
Which is why, for me, regular 12-step meetings are instrumental to my recovery, because that's where I hear my higher power is through the people that I come to know and love in the fellowship.
You have found a safe group of people who get it,
Yeah.
which is super important.
Yeah.
And I'll just say that I'll acknowledge that not all groups are safe. So
They're not.
that's part of the book is offering some guidance on how to stay safe.
I love that.
I was first sober. I was 25 years old. I was platinum blonde and I was a little underweight, shall we say. I tend not to eat when I'm depressed. So I was a little thin. Everyone thought I was on the other kind of drugs. I was a big pothead. Everyone thought I was on the other kind. I was like, nope, just depressed. Can't eat. And these.
Just
Oh,
clinical depression.
just clinical depression, just garden variety. Uh, this woman, bless her heart, Patty, pulled me aside and said, "Hey, you're young, you're cute, uh, and just FYI, there are some wolves in sheep's clothing at these meetings, and it's a good idea. It would be a good idea for you to stick with the women." And in my mind, I was like, "Ew,"
I know.
because
I'm
number
not doing that. Right.
I got all my validation then.
Yeah.
I had spent so much time and energy decorating the outside that Charlie, I honestly felt like I had nothing to offer another woman. All my friends had abandoned me, rightly so. I'm not, I was like a hot mess. I had no more friends left when I got sober. And so, but the fellas were happy.
Yeah. No shortage there. That's
Woo, Lord have mercy. There's another program for that, by the way. But so I had a woman that offered me some guardrails, where she was like, "Hey, be careful, and this is why." And so I was like, "Oh, duly noted." Right? And she's like, and there's a reason why men work with the men and women work with the women. If I could just sort of, and don't let me lose track of where we're at, but I just wanted to insert into the conversation that when I started working with that woman, Kimmers, who gave me the exercise about God with the piece of paper, that was the first time I experienced true intimacy into me. You see, this woman, I revealed to her who I really was, and she loved me anyway. She loved me anyway. She didn't run. And I loved her for that. If she were a man, guess what I would have done?
yep.
I would have said, "Oh, we're in love now, and we should sleep together. We should have sex." Right? I was
That's the next step.
I was super confused. Yeah. Oh no, turns out no. Don't do that.
Don't do that.
They say what you're attracted to when you're sick will repel you when you're well.
100%.
So water seeks its own level. So if you are really sick and I'm sure this is true for men too. I'm sure women practice predatory behaviors. I just didn't experience it that way. But if you are sick and somebody wants to rescue you, they're your equal opposite. And they are also equally sick and could do a lot of harm.
Absolutely. And there's so much value in connecting in an authentic way. If you're a man to other men, if you're a woman to other women, because many of us have had a hard time connecting to members of our same sex
Yeah.
for a lot of reasons. And there's so much growth that happens there. There's so much magic that happens in that reconnection.
So healing. So healing.
Arlena, tell me about some other barriers. And then I want to talk about, why do people leave? Why do people, end up leaving the 12-step program? Let's talk about that.
Yeah. So some of the barriers, I would say 90% of them, if it's not the triggering language, then the rest of it will be negative experiences that people have at meetings. People think, oh, typically the way it starts out for people, I have a drinking problem. Maybe you go to rehab. Maybe you go to a meeting. That's typically where people start. Somebody says, go to a meeting.
Yep. Yeah. You get out of rehab and they give you a meeting list.
Do they? Yeah. Sometimes I hear that actually some rehabs take you to meetings.
They do.
Yeah. So I didn't I didn't know that rehab was a thing 30 years ago. So I just went to a lot of meetings. I went to a lot of meetings. And I was lucky that so I lived in San Jose, the San Francisco Bay Area, like the South Bay. And there was like 800 meetings a week.
Yeah.
Right. So the young people meetings, there were speaker meetings, there were topic discussion or book study meetings. There are all kinds of meetings. And I don't know if everybody knows that. If like you're just thinking about, quote, going to AA, you don't know that there's kinds. There's women's meetings, there's men's meetings. So there's all kinds of meetings. And so sometimes a woman goes to a co-ed meeting and runs into somebody who is not healthy. Maybe it's a leader, a perceived leader who is very controlling. Could be a man or a woman.
Yeah.
A controlling sponsor is often a reason people leave.
Yeah.
A sponsor who won't let you ask questions. I've heard this many times. They'll say, just sit down, shut up, take the cotton out of your ears and put it into your mouth. These are like old-timey sayings. Some people actually they call them.
Some people need that, but not everybody.
Everybody. And if you ain't it, then you're gone, right? That's what happens a lot. So you don't find the right type of sponsor. You don't find the right. Sometimes you walk into a meeting. I've heard people talk about how they walked into a meeting and the people were saying you need to accept Jesus Christ as your Lord and Savior. Yeah. And oh, by the way, that is not an AA meeting.
No, that is not. That's an indoctrination. That's a Christian indoctrination. That's different.
Yeah, that's a cult. A cult.
Not the same.
That's one of the misconceptions or myths that people say that AA is really a cult. It's a little culty, but we can't get our members to do what we want them to do anyways.
No,
Was that your line? Did I just steal
that was my joke.
We're the worst cult in the world.
We're a terrible cult.
Yeah, terrible cult.
Nobody does what they're told to do anyway. So
Yeah. So funny. We're not trying to isolate you from your family. We're trying to get you back in it.
100%. And most people that come into the 12 steps, their first, second, and third thought is, I'm not doing that. I'm not doing that one. And I'm definitely not doing that.
Yeah. I'm not doing an inventory. I'm not telling
I'm not doing that.
I'm apologizing.
Totally not admitting it to another human being. So
Right.
I'm going to pass on that.
Your deepest, darkest secret. That's so funny. You know what? I bet you've had this experience where you've been around a long time, heard a lot of inventories. I bet nobody can scare you at this point.
No. 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 You know, it's funny you say that, Arlena. I did my inventory not with my sponsor. I did it with a spiritual advisor at a place called the Sacred Ground here in the Twin Cities. And they have spiritual advisors that's all they do is take fifth steps.
What?
Yes.
Never heard of such a thing.
It's amazing. And so I'm pretty sure this dude heard somebody say something far, far worse than I had based on hundreds. I asked him, how many? Hundreds. Okay. What I was going to tell this guy, I was not worried about after that.
Yeah.
Because after hundreds, you've heard some really dark stuff.
Yeah. Over 30 years. It's so, yeah, it's traumatizing, to be perfectly honest, to hear what people survive.
Here's my other AA joke. Okay. You know how many things you need in order to start a new meeting?
How many?
2, a coffee pot and a resentment, and the coffee pot is optional.
That is so true. I think that has to be why there are so many meetings, right?
Yes,
I'm
100%.
tempted to start my own AA meeting.
That's 100% why. Like, the leader's a jerk, and I'm starting my own.
Yeah. Well, here's the thing. There is no one person that represents the entire organization. There's not one group that represents the entire organization. So if you find an asshole or a group you don't like, find another one.
There's so many. And the only thing required to be a 12-step group is 2 people and a desire to stay sober. That's it.
Yeah.
That's it. Then you're a group.
Yeah. Or it's quit drinking.
Yeah, right. A desire to stop drinking.
Oh, stop drinking. Yeah, stay. And then you and I would probably be like, stay stopped. This is how like stuff develops, is we need to put our own spin on things, and that's actually appropriate. So it's what those people are doing that offend you, that's appropriate for them.
Absolutely.
Doesn't mean that you have to do it that way. I was told that there's a wrench for every nut, which I really like. A little nutty in the beginning.
Arlena, tell me about the favorite part of the book.
Okay. So my favorite part of the book, and this was weird because writing the book was very challenging for me. It was so hard because it was like I was having to pull all this stuff out. I probably have 7 or 8 revisions, like total drafts of the book. I had to go over it and over it and over it and over it. And it was really hard. But there was this one day when I'm writing, and, probably on draft number 6, I got the idea, I should probably ask God for some help.
Progress, not perfection, Arlena,
Yeah.
We still have to struggle a little bit before we ask for help.
I say, bless my heart to myself. Bless my heart. I've come to understand that extreme independence is a trauma response. I'm sure you can relate to that. So
I could relate that. I can relate to that on such an intimate level. It's difficult to say it in words, Arlena.
I
Yeah.
know. And I think that's true for most of us, right? We experience a lot of trauma, which is underneath all the alcoholism.
And now I'm going to do it all on my own. I don't need you. I don't need people.
Can't count on
All
you.
on my own because you're going to leave. You're going to fail me. You're going to hurt me.
All that.
So I'm just going to do everything on my own.
Yeah. Yeah. That's that extreme independence is a sign of trauma. So the process was stressful for me. So what did I do? I resorted to my, trauma response. It's the trauma that you experience in childhood. And I'm getting to my favorite part is you develop neural pathways and you repurpose that in adulthood. So if you experience stress as a child and you were isolated, which I was, then as an adult, when I'm under a lot of stress, I isolate because that's where I feel safe. So, anyways, I finally asked God for help this one day, and I was practicing and I was getting better and better. And this one day, I start writing about recovery resistance. The only thing I do in moderation is recovery. Even to this day, right? And so I'm writing about recovery resistance from my own experience, really. A lot of this book is really just my experience and whatever. Um, and I've stumbled upon, and I had been doing therapy called internal family systems, IFS. And what I realized is like, oh, all the recovery resistance I've ever had is because I have these polarized parts. There's a part of me that wants to do the work, and there's a part of me that just wants to avoid the pain of the work. Right. So recovery resistance is sort of breaking down the mechanics of why we have this resistance. It's a way to say, hey, this is part of the guidebook part where it says, hey, be aware of, allowing yourself to get offended and angry and leaving because everything in your system wants to avoid this. The system is designed to protect the system. So there's this idea that the truth will set you free, but first it will piss you off.
Yes. Yes.
That is your sign that underneath all that is a core wound that needs healing. And until you get pissed off, you don't even actually know that it's there. So it's actually a good thing. It's a good thing that you get pissed off. It's not something to avoid. It's okay. Right. And so it's a different perspective and mindset shift. It's about context and perspective of how to approach this information because your entire system will resist the healing
Mhm.
because it's hard. But the treasure you seek is in the cave you fear to enter.
Absolutely.
So
Absolutely.
I'm
I
sure.
love that, Arlena. And it occurs to me then if you're somebody who initially finds yourself resistant to some element or aspect of the 12-step program and you want to recoil from it, instead of retreating back into your default safe space, perhaps we can be curious about why we're resistant to a specific aspect or element of the program. If the God language is something that brings resistance up in us, maybe we can be curious about that and understand why that is. Maybe it's being in company with a lot of people is uncomfortable for us and feels like they might get to know me. So I don't know that I want that to happen. And so I'm resistant to it. So maybe we can be curious about why we're feeling resistance to certain things. And in that process, discover the work we need to do
Yeah. Those steps. Yeah.
that
Yeah.
are baked into the 12 steps.
Yeah. Baked in. It's baked in, and all we need is a tiny bit of willingness, a little chink in the armor. But it's so important to recognize that the feeling of anger is valid. It's also a sign. And so curiosity is huge. And I always find myself talking about compassion, like self-compassion, towards the part that gets angry.
Absolutely.
I had a sponsor tell me, she's like, you can't hate yourself. Well, she said, you have to love your unlovable parts.
Mm.
Right? Like, I come from the school of fuck your feelings.
I know. I
Right?
know.
We were just
Yeah.
talking about that a little earlier. Like,
Yes. Yes.
male energy, kind of, I'm a kind of alpha female. That's how I survived, right? Is get shit done, steamroll, fuck your feelings, all that stuff. But I had a sponsor who was like the polar opposite, who was like, you have to love your unlovable parts. And it was like she laid down the gauntlet for me. Could I? Could I love the part that I
Awesome.
hate? And what I learned through internal family systems type work that wasn't only available to me over the last few years was that there is a process of really working with those parts that I initially hated, but come to find out those parts were actually trying to protect me
Yeah.
in some way. And what they were protecting was a little tiny little one inside, like a little Arlena that got exiled through like a humiliating experience, a painful experience, and that little younger part. Like there's a lot of talk about inner child work, which sounds like woo woo.
So pop psychology.
Yeah, people are like, ew. I don't know if people are like that, but I'm always like, ew,
I
what is
know.
that? I want to do that. It's not,
It's become a cliche and it's become trite, but there's truth in it.
there is truth in it, but I like it through the lens of IFS because it makes sense. Like I'm a make it make sense kind of girl.
Yeah.
I can make it make sense. And so this this Dick Schwartz is the guy who invented internal family systems, and the way this framework that he presents, it makes sense. It makes sense that I have a protector part that wants to do the work, because if I do the work, then I'm healed, I'm stronger, I'm better, I'm not going to get loaded. I also have a part that wants to distract and dissociate and do all that stuff. And that part is also trying to protect me. So there's this work that I've been doing. I'm developing a new program called the Inner Compass Program that addresses how to resolve this internal resistance. And
I
so,
love that. I absolutely love that. And you're a woman after my own heart, Arlena, in so many ways. I have an and program today. It's 12 steps and, right? And we can add things into our recovery that help us do the work that we need to do in order to continue to get well and stay well.
so here's one of the things that takes people out of the program. And on occasion, I've sort of suffered from this mentality of like, because the program is the work, right? And when people don't do the work, it's tempting for other people in the program to say, you're not willing enough. You didn't turn it over. Have you been to a meeting? It's sort of like this shameful, like you didn't do the work. It's your
Right.
fault.
Right. Shaming.
Shaming. And what I'm saying is there is a valid reason that you are not able to do the work. And oftentimes it's like, oh, well, you're not in enough pain then. It's almost like it's your fault. You're not in enough
Right.
pain. Like we have something. Hey, we have a new tool. We have a new tool now. We don't have to do it it doesn't have to be like that. And this new tool is about loving those parts that are trying to protect you. It's not fuck your feelings, it's leverage your feelings, it's master your feelings. But it comes from a place of love, not fear. It's the love. Let's love our protectors. And they say, and Dick Schwartz will actually, the founder of IFS, will talk about how addiction is actually there's protectors and there's firefighters and there's exiles. So the protectors are the part of you that like I have managers who are like, let's get shit done. And
Yeah.
then I have firefighters who are like, no, let's fuck off and go shopping.
I know.
But the role of a firefighter, if you think about like a traditional firefighter, a house is on fire, right? So like I know I need to do some work, but I'm in so much pain that I want to avoid it. So what happens? Like my feelings are inflamed. I'm afraid, right? I don't deserve condemnation for fear. I need some help. But what comes is my survival skill. So the firefighter comes, a house is on fire. What do? They pour water on top of the house, and the water does put the fire out, but it also destroys the roof.
Destroys the house.
Yeah, destroys everything. It's
It
water damage.
destroys. Yes.
Water damage is a thing.
Yeah.
Right. So it helps you. And I always felt like the drugs and alcohol, saved my life because if I had to feel
Absolutely.
my feelings, I don't think I would have survived that either. So the purpose of addiction is still, it's distraction, but it's still to help you ultimately.
We wouldn't do it if it didn't serve some sort of purpose.
Yeah. Yeah.
If it didn't feel good, if it didn't alleviate the pain, if it didn't make us feel better, albeit temporarily.
Temporarily. Yeah. But that's what a crisis says. It's like we need immediate relief. Right.
And this work that you're talking about, Arlena, and the program that you've developed around it is really needed, I think, for a lot of different people that find themselves either in a 12-step program or contemplating recovery, because you've got high functioning folks who suffer mightily, but don't get to that really quote unquote, and I don't believe in them. Your rock bottom is death. Anything short of that, you stop digging. Okay. So let's just say that. But haven't gotten to this, surrender point yet because they've been able to function well enough to be able to keep their lives going, even though they're dying inside.
Even though they're dying inside. Yeah, that's one of the misconceptions is you don't have to hit rock bottom. Like rock bottom is whenever you decide to stop digging.
That's it. That's it. You do not have to hit rock bottom in order to recover. It's literally when you stop digging.
Yeah, it's so interesting. Since I published the book, I've had people reach out to me and go, you know what? I think I might. I'm not like this one gal comes to mind specifically. She has multiple homes. She has an amazing job, an amazing marriage, great kids. But she's starting to feel like she wants to quit drinking.
Yeah.
And she's kind of struggling with it. She's like, I don't know, maybe I can do this. I was like, oh my God. I was starting crying. I was like, yes, this is the whole reason. This
You
was
got it. And then there's folks that never experience enough pain, no matter how great it is, and end up losing their lives as a result. And I identify with both. I have a very high tolerance for suffering, Arlena. Okay. An extraordinarily high tolerance for suffering. And I discovered that in sobriety, that I have this very high tolerance for suffering. So if you're somebody that has an extraordinarily high tolerance for suffering, okay, you could benefit from some tools to help eliminate some of that resistance to change.
Yeah. What's interesting is you're talking about negative suffering. Like, so I had a I put up with inappropriate relationships, people that treated me badly. I treated myself badly because it was in alignment with what I believed I deserved.
Yeah.
Right. I had a very low tolerance for healthy suffering, which is like going to the gym and doing self-examination and making amends and like doing the work of recovery. I had very low tolerance for that kind of suffering. And what this process does is that it allows you to apply what you already know. We all know. And here's the thing, it doesn't matter what phase of recovery that you're in. I feel like people can benefit from the Inner Compass exercise. If you go to innercompassprogram.com, you can download a free PDF that has a journal exercise that you can do to just get started. Like the full program is going to be coming out in January. But It's a way to start negotiating these polarized parts because we all know what to do, but we don't take action. And so this process is going to collapse the gap between the two. So I'm with you, like I'm an and kind of girl. It's like I love the 12 steps and therapy and exercise and spiritual practices. And do you know what I'm saying? Like,
Absolutely.
of course, like I did all the things. Like
Yeah.
I'm just be that way as I like to do all the things.
I'm such an advocate for that. Be quick to be open to things that can help your recovery, whether that's therapy, whether that is medication, whether that is physical activity, whether that is social engagement, even outside of the recovery community. There's a lot of things that can really improve your overall wellness and well-being. Be quick and open to these kinds of things.
Yeah, be open-minded. That's the how, right? Honest, open-minded and willing.
You
And
got
everyone
it.
wants to fancy themselves as being open-minded. You're emotional about something for probably a very valid reason. It's hard to stay open because we're scared. And so we need to invite compassion, self-compassion and empathy to those feelings. But yeah, I'm really excited about because I feel like, oh my gosh, there's this thing called the cybernetic loop, right? You have a feeling, like we make feelings emotionally and justify logically. So we make a decision, we take an action, invoke the law of cause and effect, experience the effect, which confirms the initial belief, right?
Yeah,
So it's sort of like that. See, told you, people can't be trusted.
you got it. Self-fulfilling prophecy.
Thank you. Self-fulfilling prophecy. So it's like a cybernetic loop. So this work actually goes to the root cause to help resolve that resistance so you can kind of break out of that loop.
I love that. And I think the first thing that we need to do, and so many of us just aren't aware of these default thought and behavior patterns.
Happens so fast.
That's it. And so having a way to be able to identify them, name them, and I think to your point, Arlena, perhaps most valuably, understand why they're there and why they got there and how they got there, and understanding that it's not your fault. You're not broken. You're not defective. They're there for a good reason,
Good reason.
a really good reason. So many of us who end up having addiction have trauma,
Hmm.
and our trauma responses helped us survive the trauma and helped us cope with its impacts on us as we moved through life. And what we don't always realize is those trauma responses end up being very counterproductive for us in the long run, because the
But
trauma's not there anymore, but the responses are, and they're interfering with our happiness. They're interfering with our wellness.
can't take action because of it.
You got it.
Yeah, and the thing I like about I think you're right. I'm so glad you brought that up. I think it's so important to look at the mechanics of this. It's the science. It's looking at it through the lens of science, right? And when we do that, it becomes impersonal. It's
You
not your
got it.
fault. It's not you, right? It's science. It's biological. It's like how your neurology was developed as a child, and you develop these survival skills. You survived. Congratulations, you win.
Absolutely. You got it.
But now what was appropriate in childhood doesn't transfer into healthy like adult behavior or relationships. So we have to so what we're doing is we're reprogramming the default mode network.
It reminds me of one of my favorite questions in recovery, Arlena. Why does this make sense?
Oh,
Why does this make sense? If I continue to find myself resorting to this counterproductive behavior, why does this make sense?
yeah.
If I continue to isolate, when all I want to do is connect. Why does that make sense?
Yeah.
If I continue to binge eat when all I want to do is eat healthy, why does that make sense?
Yeah.
If I continue to drink and get drunk when all I want to do is be sober, why does that make sense?
Yeah. That's good. You're gonna set me on a path of like this is gonna be. I feel like this is as powerful as Run the Experiment. This is good. I'm gonna be working with this one for a minute.
Let's go.
Let's go.
Let's go.
That's really that explains why the parts work is so important, because what you're doing is you're realizing that the part of you that is acting out is trying to protect you. So you have to
Bet.
love that
It's
unlovable.
there for a reason. It desperately believes it needs to do that in order to protect you.
It's trying to protect you. And when we start loving these parts,
That's it.
they start to
That's
really,
it. When we go through the work and say it's going to be okay, it's going to be okay.
I'm in charge now.
That's
You
it.
can relax. You don't have to do that anymore. I got this.
Got it.
You're gonna be safe.
And by the way, thank you
Thank you.
for
Yes.
saving my freaking life.
Mhm.
But I got this now.
Yeah. It's the gratitude. Gratitude is magical. I know people who base their entire recovery on just gratitude,
Yes.
on just that.
Yes.
And it's so interesting, so the outside is just a reflection of the inside. So as you get grateful to things that are on the outside, you begin to soften on the inside. The outside is just a projection. Haven't you ever had that experience where you stand shoulder to shoulder with somebody, you witness a scene, and you both come away with two totally different interpretations of what just happened?
Absolutely.
And it's because there is no out there. We're all projecting. Our minds are like projectors.
Absolutely. And when it goes through your filter, it shows up one way, and it goes through my filter and shows up a whole different way.
Yeah. Yeah. It's so important to get other people's perspectives, especially if something in your life isn't working. Yeah. Did we cover all the things that we wanted to cover? I feel like we're going long.
I think so. I think we did. I think we did, except for
What?
the dark side of the sober social media movement. So maybe we can end with, what is the dark side, Arlena, of the sober social media movement?
Man. Well, there's a couple of, and I wonder if you've noticed the same thing, but there's some very beautiful, talented writers, people who are young and beautiful, who have just nothing but vitriol against AA.
Yeah.
But some of them have never even tried it. There's one gal.
Attempts prior to investigation.
Yeah, I called that out pretty early on. But what's interesting is that, so on one hand, they are bucking the system. They are rejecting the patriarchy. They are they're throwing off shame labels. That was another thing I missed to talk about. One of the three big trigger words was alcoholic.
Yeah.
They're throwing, it's a shame label in my mind, and I'm sure in yours, it's a badge of honor. It's just,
Absolutely.
so we are allowed to redefine what words mean. And to me, the word alcoholic means somebody who has a tremendous amount of courage, who's walked through the fire and come out and is rising like the phoenix on the other side. I go, it's like, you say you're an alcoholic and I'm an alcoholic. Like, we both understand a whole lot.
You got it. You're my brother. You're my sister.
100%. Like, I get you in a way. And like, immediately we're like best friends.
Absolutely.
So, so there's people everybody has a platform now. Some people are really talented at social media, and they're creating these large platforms based on misunderstandings, misconceptions, fears, blah, 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 all that stuff. And they're saying, hey, you should get sober this way. And I'm like, it's not that way is wrong. but it is tainting people and driving them away from a process that is freaking magical.
Yes.
Or, they say you can move mountains, but bring a shovel. And to me, that's kind of the dark side of social media sobriety, is there's this hurt is really what it is.
Yeah.
All the vitriol is hurt, which is valid. But they are they're like the Pied Piper leading people off of the cliff, right? They don't really have
Absolutely.
the expertise.
Absolutely. And I think if you are somebody who has found a path to recovery that works for you, you should
Do
tell
it.
people about it. You should recover out loud. If that's something that you're moved to do and you feel called to do, I think you should do that. Disparaging any other program of recovery is just harmful. It's just plain harmful, and I dare say irresponsible.
Yeah, irresponsible.
So
That's the way to put it.
that's what it is. It's irresponsible and it's harmful.
Dangerous is what it is.
You go, girl. You go, boy. If you found a recovery method that works for you and you found joy and happiness and purpose, recover out loud. Tell people about it.
Yeah.
But what you don't need to do is disparage any other program of recovery in the process. You're just harming potentially many other people who may have found value in those programs, but now feel like they can't go there because of, your particular vendetta against them.
Yeah. Yeah. Well said. That was really, the point I wanted to make, is that you and I are in alignment with it's an and kind of a thing.
It is an and kind of thing. Like you can be a Vikings fan and afford it.
But we are football fans.
But we are football fans at heart, are we not?
Oh, amen to that. Yeah, feel that. It was so funny when we were scheduling this. You were like, let's see it on Sunday. I'm like, okay, but it has to be before or after the Niner game. And you were like, cool, because that's when the Vikings play.
Woman after my own heart. Woman after my own heart. So go Niners, go Vikes.
Yeah.
Let's go. Or should I say skull?
I don't know that part. Viking, is that a
No, I'll teach you. I will. Skull.
what does that mean?
Yes. Skull. We do a skull chant.
Is that the Vikings do?
Yes.
Oh, well, it's interesting because your arms look like horns. I don't know if that was intentional. Is that what it is? That's funny.
That was a complete
We
accident.
digress.
Arlene, I had an absolute blast interviewing you on your own podcast.
Charlie, I couldn't have found a better person to do it. Thank you so much for your wisdom and insight. I knew you were going to be amazing. You did not disappoint. Thanks for helping me get the message out.
Thanks for having me on.
We'll talk again soon.
One last thing before you go, you can follow the podcast on Instagram for daily inspiration at ODAT Podcast. And if you'd like to get a biweekly email from me with recommendations to books I'm reading, meditations I love, or other recovery podcasts, just sign up for it at odatchat.com. That's ODAAT chat.com. And if you do, I hope you enjoy it.